Well, hello everyone, and we're doing a special edition today that I wanted to get to many of you who are experiencing all kinds of unfortunate things as it relates to the pandemic that we're in. But in the midst of the pandemic that we're in, I wanted to see how we can attach hope to the grief that we're experiencing, because hope does not make ashamed. And we want to make sure that you are filled with hope in this time. So many of you who are watching right now, I want you to share this with someone and go ahead and invite them to a conversation about hope in the midst of grief. Who doesn't need hope? Everybody needs hope. And I have a wonderful person on today who happens not just to be a counselor and a psychiatrist or a psychologist or whatever those titles
Counselor.
are. Counselor for many people, but happens to be one for myself personally. So I am happy to bring her to you as she has helped me through many things and continues to help me through many things. I want her to provide insight and spiritual insight to many of you who are listening tonight. So I want to welcome Miss Wanda, and I want to ask you first, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I want to thank you for allowing us to talk during this day. I want to ask you the most obvious question, because you are always counseling other people and always talking to other people. And for those of you who don't know what her counseling agency is, it is called Hope Springs Counseling. So I want to make sure that you know that. But how are you coping through all this that is happening right now? But, you know, you always tell us or listen to us, but we're asking, how are you coping with this?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question because, you know, just because I'm a counselor, it doesn't make me different than the average person. And for example, going to the grocery store, and for the very first time in my somewhat long life, seeing bare spots on the shelves, right? And my internal response was, oh, well, maybe I need to stock up, you know, and I could feel like this anxiety rising and wanting to just buy things that I didn't necessarily need at the time. And I had to quiet my heart. I had to turn to Jesus and say, wait a minute, it's okay. We're in a pandemic. We're not at a loss for food, you know? And I had to do the work to restore peace to my heart in order to move forward. And so I say that to say that I have my moments of anxiety and questioning, you know, where is this going to lead us? How long is it going to go on? What's the effect on my business and my ministry and my family going to look like when it's all said and done? But the bottom line is when I turn back to Jesus, he's my rock, he's my mainstay, you know, and the peace comes back. So
yeah.
In the moment, I'm doing great.
So would you say that is what is balancing you right now for many of the different uncertainties? Do you believe that? Because many of us who are listening, or those of us who are connected, are from a place of faith. But in the midst of things that are somewhat shaking our faith or trying to shake our faith, how do you, we're believing in Jesus, but how do we maintain a balance with the media, the different things that are going on, and hearing it, but not allowing it to affect us?
Yeah. I think, do you remember that old acronym GIGO?
No.
Garbage in, garbage out.
No, I've never heard that.
That's dating me. This is really, really old. But anyway, the basic principle holds today. You know, what you put in is what you're going to get out, right? And so what I can say about the media is it is very important for us to stay informed. Absolutely. We want to use reliable sources of information so that we're not feeding on the wrong information and getting the facts wrong. Very important. But if we overdo, like any other thing in our life, if we overdo, we're going to begin to feel the results of it. So if you fill your day with listening to the media and the bad news of the day, right? Because right now, all they're doing is tracking the rise of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And that's bad news, really. I mean, it's just the predictions are not very positive at all. And so the thing that I can say there is limit your exposure to the amount of time, I guess, that you are exposed to the news and the media. Um, Turn it off and put on praise and worship. Turn it off and have a conversation with someone.
We have a lot of time right now at home. Some
Mhm.
of us do. Well, most of us, because we're under a stay-at-home mandate, so we're
Right.
supposed to be at home. So any of you who are not at home right now, turn around, go back. So we're supposed to be at home. And we have a lot of time with our friends, family, loved ones. We're FaceTiming people we hadn't normally FaceTimed and talking to people we hadn't normally talked to, and all of that. I wanted to know, how should we approach our mental stability during this time? Because though there are some of us who are at home with people that we love and want to be around, and there's some people who are like, how much longer am I going to be? Because at some point the walls start to close in on you.
Yes.
The dog barks too much. How do you, outside of unplugging from the media, outside of plugging, because many of us are plugged to our phones.
Mm-hmm.
um, there's a briefing every single day, on top of, some parents are homeschooling, some people are laid off. There's a lot of things. How do we approach stability of our mind right now?
A few of the things that I think might be really, really helpful is to have a routine, right? When you have unscheduled blocks of time that go on forever, it can feel like it's going on forever. And I think that's when you can start to feel the pressure and the stress of being at home and being with the same people for hours and hours on end. And so, one thing that I really recommend is maintain a routine. Get up at a certain time. We don't have to, if you're not having to go to work, then you don't have to get up at 6 a.m. or whenever, like you used to. So maybe push it back an hour or whatever. But let that alarm ring and get up and, you know, take your shower and do your quiet time and have your cup of coffee or whatever, and start your day in routine. The other thing is, I think, to schedule some mental breaks where you kind of um, go internal and isolate with just you and Jesus, and get to a place that's quiet. Sit outdoors in the sun. Take that walk. The exercise portion of that is going to be really, really helpful. Take the walks and get some physical activity so the blood is flowing and your mind is free. But turning your mind, that scripture, I think it's 2 Corinthians 10:5 maybe, that talks about taking captive your thoughts to the obedience of Jesus, and when your mind starts going to those fearful thoughts and that what if and all of that, the answer is going to always be the same for us as Christ followers, and that's then Jesus. And so turn to him and talk to him. I think those are the kinds of things that I think can keep us kind of balanced internally.
Yeah, that's really good. There was something that I was listening to the other day, something that I've heard for many years, as far as the stages of grief, or what I have known. Because when I just heard this podcast recently, it made me look at it again and say, well, maybe these are not the stages. But I can't remember the original person who actually came out with a study or a book basically saying anger,
Elizabeth
question.
Kubler-Ross.
Yes, anger, questioning, bargaining, all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the podcast I was listening to with David Kessler and Brene Brown was basically saying that the stages were designed to be descriptive and not linear, which is to say that, and I had to listen to it again because I had been taught or had been told that these are the stages that you go through. You start out with this, then you move to this, and then you move to this, and you might be in stage number 2 right now. So I've had to recant some of the things I've said, because I've even found myself saying that because that's what was told to me. But they were saying that these are not linear, they're descriptive things. And I said all of that to say that right now we are in a stage of grief from the sense of death brings about, and we're not just talking about physical death, but any interruption causes the normal to be changed. And many of us keep saying, I want things to go back to normal, which is the equivalency to what we feel with death. Well, like, I want that person, I want that thing back, and it won't come back. And we don't know what our society is getting ready to look like. Businesses, ministries, school, families, we don't know any of that for weeks or months at a time. And we're all having the normal conversation. So we're in stages of grief, but they're not number 1, number 2, number 3. So how do we deal with this, and how do we have conversations about how to deal with the grief that we're really experiencing right now? And I'm learning as well, like that, because I'm now saying this is describing what I might feel, but not saying this is where I'm supposed to be at this particular time.
Right. I like to think of, I don't even know who first described the stages of grief as waves. Okay. And if you think of it in that term, it's more fluid. Then you can grasp it. You can kind of like get your mind around the idea that there are these stages, but they don't go in order. You don't experience them 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm at 5 and I'm accepting and we're done. Right. So you can be in stage 3, and then all of a sudden something kick you back into stage 1. That wave of that particular emotion washes over you, and now you're there and you're having to deal with it. So if you could picture being in the ocean, right, and the waves that roll in. And I haven't been to the ocean in a long time, unfortunately, but as a little girl, I was there quite frequently. And I remember standing in the ocean and waves coming in. And the more that I planted my feet and stiffened my legs, the more likely the wave was to knock me over. Okay. But if I let my knees kind of buckle just a little bit and was more kind of accepting of the wave coming at me, it would wash over me, pick me up, and I would land back on my feet. And so that's what I like to tell my clients who are experiencing grief. Let the wave come. It's okay. It's normal. And it's not going to take you under, right? And when you take that relaxed posture, that accepting posture of it, it doesn't, it's easier to get through it. It's easier to feel like, okay, I weathered that and my feet are planted. I'm okay. We have to acknowledge how we're feeling. The stages of grief are generally, let me see if I can remember without thinking them. Denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and then finally acceptance. And those probably weren't in the proper order, but those are the basic stages. So then you can, knowing that and having that in the back of your mind, when you're feeling a particular emotion, then you're able to assign it to the right thing, feel it, process it, and go on.
And David Kessler added another one, I believe, called Finding Meaning. That he said he had asked permission from the family to add that extra step, and they did, which is to say, he said at first it was like people were looking at that as, I have to find meaning in this death. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, for someone who child was murdered, or for something that someone had a miscarriage, you can't find meaning in the death. But he was saying finding meaning is after the event has happened, mm-hmm. what did it do for you, or or what did you learn because of it or something.
How have you grown? How have you grown
Yes.
through it?
Yeah.
How can you take tragic events and turn around and use them in the positive? That speaks of our Father, and it speaks of the Word all over again, right?
Yeah.
Um, we don't just go through difficult times just because. And God never wastes our grief, and He never wastes, the things that we go through. He does have a purpose. He can give purpose to it and use it if we allow Him. And so I agree with that wholeheartedly. Um, Being able to turn around and use what's happened in a positive way brings meaning.
Yeah. So in this pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
how do we not just find meaning, but how do we allow all of these waves
Mm-hmm.
to hit us?
Yeah.
Because the world is hitting us, and many of us are fighting it like, no, I don't like this,
Mm-hmm.
but it has to naturally happen. How do we go through these many different, because some of us are at the anger stage or the
Mm-hmm.
questioning, bargaining, whatever the different descriptive ways are. How do we go through these different things? Because um, grief is uncertain. Like, you don't know, just like this pandemic, we don't know when it's going to end. We don't sometimes know, like, there's no set day. Like, there's not, you're going to grieve for 7 days and you'll be done.
Mm-hmm.
7 months and it's done. It's coming to us. How do we not resist it and allow it? How do we process all of this that's going on?
Yeah, yeah. Um, So I think how our posture, our initial posture really helps. If you think of, I'm very visual, so I talk in pictures all the time. Sorry about that. But
Yeah.
if you think of being on a roller coaster ride, right, you see people in one of two postures. Either they, you know,
Mhm.
and they're like stiff, and you could see the terror in their eyes and on their face, right? And they're on the ride and they can't get off. And then you see the people with their arms up in the air, and it's like, wee, and it is an adventure. And so
Yes.
here's what I would like to suggest. We're in a place we've never been before, and we're traveling a road that we've never traveled before. What happens if we begin to look at it more as an adventure with
Mm.
Jesus, knowing that He knows where we're going? He sees the beginning from the end and the end from the beginning, and we don't have to know. Do you get on a roller coaster ride or an amusement park ride and inspect every up and down and hill and then look to where you're going to end up and all that kind of stuff? No, we just get on. And with Jesus, we can do that. We can really trust that He is with us and He's taking us in a way that we don't know, but He does know.
Yeah.
I think of like the Israelites going from Egypt to the promised land. The fire by night and the cloud by day. They didn't know where they were going. They trusted what was before them and what God was doing to lead them. And we can lead. We can let Him lead, and we can trust His leadership. And if we do that, we can live more in peace. And in part of that, though, and I don't want to suggest at all that we shouldn't be that we should deny how we're feeling. Like, don't be afraid, you're a Christ follower. I'm not saying that. You do have to acknowledge how you're feeling in order to bring it to Him, in order to surrender it to Him. So
I wanted to ask just a few more things. There are many people who have experienced a death right now. We've been circulating around that a lot,
yeah.
but there are people who have been sick and have lost their loved ones, and they were not able to be at the bedside when it happened. They weren't able to go there because of the restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
Death is already difficult, and it has been said that it is never convenient.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, nothing is convenient. And how do people, and I really grieve for people, and there's some people that are close to us and even in our church family that have been dealing with some things that we've dealt with loss.
Mm-hmm.
How do we or those family members deal with closure when they weren't able to have those final moments? Or, most people when they're, at their last stages, people are coming in, they're saying, call the family in and stuff. Well, right now, family cannot come in. And then when you have a memorial, often if the family's large, the family still can't come. So that's really a lot to process and deal with, on top of dealing with all of the different things that have hit us that we're processing. Then you have a family member who gets struck with it. Now you're having to find out how to deal with that. So how do we approach closure, in this, or is that just another wave that we have to just allow to come to? I don't know.
Yeah. And, I don't have a great answer for that. Again, we're traveling a road we've never been on before. Who has ever heard of that, where a family can't get together and grieve and mourn together the loss of a loved one? But we find ourselves there. And I think that um, in these days, we have to use creativity. We have to use the things that we have available to us, being able to meet via the different kinds of programs like Zoom that we're doing right now, being able to see multiple family members at one time, to be able to cry together, grieve together, remember together, I think would be really, really helpful in the process of saying goodbye. Sometimes I have clients write letters to their the one that they've lost, and that can be really helpful to process through. Just journaling can be helpful, but stay connected. Don't try to do it in isolation, even though we're kind of in isolation. Reach out to people and talk, and um, remember, and allow yourself permission to feel the grief, because I think in the grief of this season, there's going to be the added layer of anger about the season, that because of this COVID, I can't be with my family, and I couldn't be with my loved one, and so you might need to be angry at COVID-19, to process through some of those feelings.
Yeah, that's very, very good. And it's layered too. That the after effects of this could be very long lasting, not just economically, but emotionally, and how this is. So I want to ask, many of us, like myself, usually come to counseling. We come to buildings to seek out a couch to sit on or something. We're not able to do that right now. Do you know of communities, or how does that work for clients? How does that work for people that would normally be saying, hey, I need somebody to talk to? So how does that work?
Right. And I really encourage people to reach out to counselors in this particular season, because it's stress in a way that we've never experienced it before, as a country, as a community, as individuals, and a family. So it is important. At this point by now, most of the therapists have transitioned to telehealth sessions, and people can get sessions with their therapist. So if you were already in counseling, I highly recommend that you contact your therapist and see if they're doing telehealth, because you quite potentially could continue to see them. Here at Hope Springs, I have 5 therapists in all, and we're all doing telehealth sessions. So that's really a key thing. And then the thing that I would look to is your church, because a lot of churches are doing their churches services online, but they also have small groups, and you want to stay connected with your small group. In my church, we call them life groups, and so I still continue to attend my life group. On Thursday nights, we do the mat at Lexington City Church, and so the mat has transition to online, and so we can hear the big service, and there's always a good teaching or a testimony or something that's really encouraging, and that starts at 6:30, and then at 7:30 our small groups start. And so right now I help co-facilitate the codependency group, And we just met last night and got to see lots of people on the screen and encourage one another and pray for one another. And so those are the kinds of things. And also even like with AA, there are AA groups that are now transitioned to online meetings. So you want to reach out and find out what supports you had in place before are actually still in place. They felt for a while like they were gone because we didn't know what to do, but now we're getting our feet under us and we're making transitions and we're adapting. And so find out what's still in place for you. And if it's not what was familiar before, this is a great season to begin to test out and find out what groups are online that you can connect to. You want to make sure that it's a good, solid group and that it's not, just a group of people that are sitting around complaining, and because that becomes like the news, bad news, and will create this downward spiral. So.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for the nuggets that you have poured out. I heard in what you were just saying, for everyone who's listening, what I heard is that community is important, and that reaching out, not going through this by yourself, thinking that you're by yourself, thinking that there's no one there or no resources available for you. And so that's what I heard out of that reminder that it's going to take a village to be able to get through this, and you're going to need all the support. So if there was any final thing you would like to say to all those who are listening to, you started out with what's working for you. If there's anything you want to share, finally, any encouragement.
Yeah. Well, you started out talking about hope, and that is so very important and key. There's a scripture that says that we are not as the world, and do not grieve without hope, or that we grieve with hope. I think it's in the positive, that we grieve with hope. And we need to remember that. I have been so encouraged. On the one hand, I really believe that our governor's been doing a great job leading us.
Absolutely.
And his whole demeanor has been really helpful and calm. But he's been using a slide from the 1918 pandemic, right? And that was the Spanish flu, and it was pretty bad, and lots of people lost their lives. And so we're trying to respond in a healthy way, right? And so I saw that slide, and in the same maybe day or couple of days, I saw an advertisement for a movie, 1917, and it clicked, and I thought, oh my word, Jesus, the world was at war, and then turned around and had to deal with a pandemic, and they made it, and you were still on the throne, and it just brought peace to my heart. Because initially I was with everybody else feeling like these are unprecedented days, and and in some ways we haven't ever been here, but the world has.
Yes.
And they did it with less resources.
Yes.
And so please, we have to have hope, and we have to remember that Jesus is still King. He's still on his throne. He has not abandoned us. We are not alone. And we are not alone as a community. We do have one another, and we really can reach out and stay connected that way. And that gives hope and builds hope. There is an end, there's an end to grief. We really do get to the place where the waves are so minor that they don't really affect us. We continue to miss the people that we've lost, or miss the things that we've lost, but our stability and our place of firmness returns.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to look forward to. We're going to get through this. And like the governor has said, hashtag, we'll get through this together.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you pray for those who are listening now? I think that what you just said was just a perfect window to go ahead and pray for those who are listening.
Okay. Well, Jesus, thank you for Pastor Mario and just his leadership for his body and the people that are under his leadership. And thank you for everyone that hears this, Jesus. And I just pray for their minds and their hearts to be directed to you. For those who know you, that they would remember, the things that you have done in the past and the ways that you've shown up in the past. Just like the children of Israel, you told them to remember. We need to remember that, and it will carry us through. And for those that don't know you, Jesus, I pray for their hearts, that they would be able to call out to you and know that you're there and you're real, and you love them, and you're calling them to yourself. And so I just pray for the whole community that's listening, Jesus, that you would show yourself mighty and strong in each person's life, uphold them and strengthen them, and give them peace in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, friends, as there's a challenge going on around, and everyone is taking the line of the song that we sing as children, said he's got the whole world in his hand. I want to remind you all tonight, if there's any place to rest your hope in, is knowing that nothing can snatch you out of the hand of God. So rest in that, no matter what the world does, no matter what's going on in society, no matter what has hit you personally, he's got you in the palm of his hand. So be encouraged. Thank you all for tuning in today. And I hope that this has helped you, that you watch this and share this with your other friends. A time of hope in the midst of grief. Goodbye.